Could you describe your racial identity and your ethnicity for us?
I'm African American, and I was told by my mother that I'm Native American.
I am half Hispanic, half Black.
I usually identify as Black or Hispanic.
I'm 75% white on my dad's side,
Hmm.
and tracing that back, they came from Czechoslovakia as Episcopalian immigrants. But on my mom's side, or from my mom's side, I have Chinese heritage, about 25%.
Yeah, so my dad is originally from Pakistan, and my mom is just like, I think that she has like Norwegian, kind of like Norse, identity, but she's like from the States, like I think her parents came in like the 1800s.
So I am mostly African American, but I'm about 25% Korean. And so my grandma on my dad's side is from Korea, and then all my other side, my mom's side, and then my other side is African American.
What experiences have shaped your understanding of your identity and the way that you express it?
I feel like it's really unique for me because my parents are divorced and I don't really have contact with one of my parents, so I really only know about like African American side a lot more than the Asian side because my Asian parent isn't really in the picture.
I feel like most of my experiences that have shaped my identity have been, I mostly went to like predominantly white schools, so the only way I was able to really express my identity or my Black side was with family. My Korean side, I really haven't gotten to really express it or learn about it because my grandma lives pretty far away, so we don't really get to see her that often. The only way I've really expressed that is by visiting her and getting to learn more about her experience where she.
I guess I don't really claim or associate with that side of me, even if it is true, because I just feel like I can't really relate to it. And then since I'm just, I just have a lot of like African American interactions, I would just feel out of place and not accepted, even if I did try to join Native American community. People believe me. I already know there's a couple people who don't.
I definitely think I am perceived as a Black woman, and so I definitely feel more connected to Black women, and I share more experiences of just like hair and culture and beauty and stuff like that. So I definitely would say yes, I feel more connected to Black culture just like in society, but most of my family that lives near me is Hispanic, and so I do feel like culturally I have more ties to my Hispanic side just because my mom's side is all here and near me, and so like all the parties that I went to growing up or any of the events were largely Hispanic, but definitely out in the world I definitely feel more Black.
First of all, like my name plays like a really important factor. It's like Jasir Rahman, and it's an Arab name, which is like a Muslim name. And so I think that having that like part kind of like makes it very clear that I have from like some other identity, because I think that I can be like passing as a lot of things, but I think that like when you hear like Jasir Rahman, you know it's clearly not something that's like in the majority, which has worked like to my advantage and against my advantage.
When I was growing up, my mom like enrolled me in this program called Jack and Jill, and Jack and Jill is like a completely African American organization. So I grew up like around a lot of Black people, but the schools that I went to growing up, I was in like a mostly like majority white neighborhood. Definitely Jack and Jill and like growing up around Black people shaped my experience and going back home to the Caribbean.
So growing up, I pretty much just had I'd say my identity was pretty defined as just a normal, like what you'd expect for a white upbringing, I guess, for the culture. But when I was around 12, I actually got to meet my great aunt that I mentioned earlier, who was the only surviving member from China. And she showed me a lot of the pictures and kind of what my family heritage was from that side. And so it was a little unique to have a completely different upbringing than what the rest of my family was from. Led to somewhat of an out-of-body or out-of-stance experience where it led me to reflect on kind of how I was brought up and how some part of my identity, I guess, that I never really associated with before, was just kind of not there, regardless of like what I'd been born with my genetic information.
Have you ever felt conflicted about your identity?
Yeah, I think totally I have. I grew up not speaking some Spanish, but not a whole bunch, and it was always like it was like harder to learn because my dad doesn't speak Spanish and my mom does, and so I didn't grow up in a household where I was lucky enough to like have both parents speaking Spanish. And so a lot of times I was kind of just like, oh, like I just don't even want to like have to work hard to like know Spanish. Like I just don't. And if you don't necessarily like look Hispanic or something like that, it's harder to, I feel like, grasp onto that culture. And so a lot when I was growing up, I was always like, oh, I'll just be black and I'll just like go with the flow and it's easier. I don't have to learn the language to be black. I can just do it. And as I got older, I was like, oh, but now I like really, really want to like be able to be both. And so I definitely felt conflicted in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little unusual, like I said, because I didn't have any of the like Chinese upbringing, or like that didn't affect me at all. And so whenever I learned about a quarter of my genetic history, and start to learn about kind of what my family went through and everything that they had with their culture growing up, it was just a little weird and led me to be kind of self-reflective on, oh, here's my culture and not everybody grew up like this. And so like different experiences can lead you to feel like different things, and your culture and your racial identity can kind of play a part in building who you are with how you're forming yourself from your inner workings with your mind, but also your external environment. And so it was just kind of a strange experience, like I said earlier with one of our questions, to have that perspective put on me whenever I was 12.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there are lots of like stereotypes associated with like each aspect of my identity, like, oh, like Nigerian kids, and like the stereotypes about like immigrant kids and stuff in general. And there's some overlap with like Indian immigrant kids and all of that. Even in high school, I feel like people would make jokes and they'd be like, oh my gosh, you're like the perfect Nigerian/Indian kid. And I'd be like, what does that mean? Just the way that I guess like behave and stuff, I'm always like very cognizant of like, is this like a stereotype, or is this what like people would like expect of me? But then I'm like, why am I trying to act the way people would expect of me based on like some like outdated stereotype that's untrue? I try not to let it affect me, but it definitely does.
Do you feel like Rice has changed the way that you view your racial identities at all?
When I was a freshman, I really wanted to like join BSA and join like the Caribbean Society and everything, but I just felt like, I don't know, I felt kind of like disconnected from like that part of myself when I came to Rice, because when I was in high school I was obviously in like all black organizations and that was great, and then coming to Rice I felt like, I don't know, there was just kind of like a disconnect. So I like stopped being active in those organizations and just started like focusing on school, I guess.
I definitely don't think I came in super sure of my identity other than like, oh, I am half and half or whatever. Beyond that, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do at Rice in terms of like interacting with my identity and getting involved in like cultural groups. Some organizations just feel a bit more exclusionary just because it's like there's no one else that's really like you. With the Indian student associations and in general a lot of the Asian student associations, there are not that many people who are multiracial. So when you show up and you like look different from everyone else, you're like, the point of this organization is that you kind of have everyone look kind of the same as you, and that's not really happening. I feel like I really wanted to get involved in lots of different groups and things and I guess find myself a bit more. And I feel like I didn't really do that much, but I guess just through my time at Rice, I realized that I didn't need to do that. Like, my identity is my identity, and if I want to, like, learn about it, I can, and that doesn't necessarily involve, like, going to, like, a cultural event and, like, learning how to do, like, a dance or something. Like, it's how I want to interact with it.
See more people who are, like, of my same, like, kind of ethnic identity. There's a lot more, like, South Asian people here, which is really cool. It's really cool to see all of this like cultural expression, and again, it's like people have experiences that are like completely different. Even when you think that you might be like completely like identifying with other people, there's like still a lot of differences there, and that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I'm super like attuned into the affinity groups. I don't feel like I have like a lot of like cultural showcases to offer, and I think that a lot of it is like cultural dance or cultural singing, and I don't really have training or expertise in those areas. Whereas I feel like there are a lot of people at Rial's are like super cool. They're like fantastic. And I wish that I like knew Bungar or whatever, but I don't. So I guess that kind of makes it hard to feel like I have something to contribute to those groups.
It was just kind of the next stepping stone in that process of kind of understanding other people's perspectives with how they were different from me growing up and how they perceive the world and go through the world. And coming from like a smaller town, especially in moving to Houston, it's a whole lot different, and you meet a whole lot of new people who are not just from around America, but from around the world. And so it was kind of like almost a natural stepping stone into, okay, I've had these experiences with these people from back home, but now there's a whole lot of people that I'm going to be meeting at Rice who have a vast variety of different backgrounds. And so it was fun, I guess for lack of a better term, to meet all these new people and to see like, oh, they're different from me in this way and they have this upbringing with this culture. And it's so different from not only what I've heard, but like myself. And so it just kind of was a good progression, I guess, moving to Rice.
A lot of multiracial people are just lumped together. Like, it might just be a category on something, but it's not like they're the same because it's all these different identities. It's not just, oh, you're just multiracial, so you're all just together. Maybe if people did, well, I don't know, sometimes there may not be enough people in the same group, but people did make groups for different things, or I guess if they did make one like Bars Club and then have their different like subcategories, like celebrating all their different identities, that may help.
There should be more in terms of like maybe like educational / informational material in terms of like these are multiracial people and like these are identities, because I think Rice does a pretty decent job at like uplifting different voices. They don't always recognize like the intersectionality, so it's always like, oh, like LGBTQ plus groups or like Black Student Association, but not like Black queer people. Multiracial people are like kind of fall into that realm of intersectionality just because we have multiple races, and I think Rice could do more in terms of just like talking to people about that, or even just having programming on campus that's like centered on that, like I don't know, making those resources like accessible on campus. So like inviting like a speaker who's multiracial to like talk about it or something and like promoting it everywhere and things like that. I feel like less people would ask like, oh, what are you or where are you from, if they like had that type of education.
From Kentucky, so I think that's not an area where there's a lot of like other people who look like me, or like just people of color in general. In middle school, I went to a very like predominantly white middle school, and I think that there was like a lot of people who would like make jokes about like my ethnicity and like, you know, stuff about like my religious background, and I don't think that they really understood like kind of my experience, and I don't think that I really had avenues to kind of like have other people who kind of had similar kind of backgrounds.
The sense of like otherness that you get from being multiracial sometimes is, I think I've like mentioned this a lot, but people like ask like, what are you, and blah blah blah, or they'll like just say very like weird things. Like I've had people make comments about my hair not being real, and they're like, you're Black, there's no way your hair could be that long, and I'm just like, actually my mom's hair is super long and that's where I get it from. And things like that I feel like are really like tough about being multiracial.
The code switching thing is something that I learned when I was really little. My mom talked about it because in the Caribbean, like, they all have accents and stuff, but her grandparents and, like, her parents and her family all told her, or, like, made sure that she learned how to speak with an American accent and a Caribbean accent so that she would be, like, perceived as professional. And so with me, there's the Black accent, right? Like, when I'm in school or like in high school, like around a lot of white people, like I do not say the N-word. I do not talk with a Black accent. And it's just a lot different versus when I'm in a group of Black people, like I feel like I can just be that like different person, you know?
I think growing up, my mom's a Hispanic one and my dad's black, and so my mom didn't really know how to take care of my hair. She definitely tried, and I definitely fought her on some points. So it's not all her fault. If my mom ever finds this video, please, But I think growing up, I just did not have hair textures that looked like anybody else that I knew, and I did not have someone who necessarily knew exactly how to take care of it and could force me to sit down and do my hair when what looked nice. And so I think that's definitely one thing I dislike. Even when I look back at pictures from me from middle school, I'm like, oh my god, I didn't know what gel was, I didn't know what brush, I didn't know what anything was, and so it was I was just struggling a little bit. But
That I found is that I don't think that there are some people who I feel who might be of one particular identity. They might be Black, Asian, or whatever, and they come to Rice, for example, and then they are able to find a space where they feel kind of comfortable. And I don't think that there's anywhere like that where I'm I would feel I would fit in, but I also don't feel I necessarily am ever really an out group. I don't know. I'm just kind of caught in the middle, and it's I don't know, kind of a weird experience, I guess.
I just think it means that I get to be a lot of different things that other people I don't think necessarily get to be.
Just feels like something that's really cool that I can share and be proud of, and I can interact with two different cultures and they're a part of me, which is something that's really cool, I guess, to me, being able to just interact and learn so many different things.
It means that I have different cultures and different ways that I can experience my life and express myself, because Black side, I feel I have a certain way of talking, a certain way of hanging out. I've got Black food, Black music. And then with the Korean side, it's very different culture, very different norms and food. And so being multiracial, I feel allows me to be able to experience different cultures that I normally wouldn't have been able to experience or share with other people.
I think, I think there's a lot of stereotypical biracial kids that are I don't know what to pick, and it's fun to make fun of them, and I like to make fun of them myself and whatever, but it is, you know what I mean? It can be hard to pick, and it can be hard to decide, especially depending on how you look. It's easier to be thrust into a category than to decide that you really are both, and to have that with open arms. But yeah, I think that it's fun to make jokes, but it is kind of real in a way, you know what I mean? So
People who have a monoracial upbringing, I think the main takeaway would just be that other people have different experiences than you, and you should try to learn them and also respect them for the great and wonderful kind of aspects and stuff that they can bring with their personality.
I don't think that we're always accepted within each of our respective groups, and I think that can be an uncomfortable position, but sometimes it can be empowering too, because I feel I can kind of weave between these worlds and experience things. So it's kind of valuable in some ways, and then other ways it can be a little bit uncomfortable. But I think just embracing us for who we are, and seeing us again as human beings and not really defining us by our identity.
That it can be I guess really tough balancing cultural expectations and cultural norms. So it's even though I am multiracial, I don't necessarily know every single thing about both races. I've had Asian friends be how do you not know what this food type is? And I'm just what do you mean? And things like that. You have twice as many cultures, I guess, or however many cultures you're mixed with, to interact with, but that doesn't mean that you know every single thing and fully interact with every single thing to the same extent as someone who's monoracial does.
I guess I would want them to know to not judge or assume what someone's identity is just by looking at them or just by the way that they talk or act or their upbringing, and to also know that there are specific sets of challenges and that multiracial people have to go through that monoracial groups don't. And so I feel and it's a lot of stuff that isn't spoken about or isn't really talked about at Rice or just in general.